So I am joined today by Adam Lavrentiadis. How are you?
I'm very well, Emma. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Very, very welcome. Now, you are joining us today from San Francisco, and I mention that because that's one of the themes of the conversation that we're going to be having, your kind of your global career, and would love to understand how that came about, how that panned out, and kind of talk through that in a bit more detail. But take me back to the beginning. Where did it all start? And
Yeah,
did you
sure.
always know that kind of marketing was the path that you wanted to go down?
Yeah. So I guess to take it back, I'm taking it back about 20 years and aging myself a little bit in the process. But I originally moved from Australia 21 years ago this year, and my first stop was London, actually. So, I was like many young Australians who just kind of wanted a bit of a taste of an overseas experience. And it all started with a visa, in terms, I think there's a very easy Australian UK reciprocal kind of visa
Yeah.
thing going on, which I think still exists today. And it was a 2 year working holiday visa. And I said to my parents, look, it's going to be, it'll be about a year. And then, I'll come
Yeah,
back
that old
and
chestnut. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then, got sucked in by the bright lights of the big city and just was loving, loving life in the UK and in London. And fortunately, you mentioned my full name, and the long surname is a Greek one. My father was born in Greece. I have a Greek passport. And so basically, while I was on my visa still, I went through the process of getting my Greek passport. At the time, the UK was wonderfully part of the EU. So I could
Yeah.
basically get that, and it would kind of give me, very blessed. It's given me the opportunity to I spent 13 years in London, incredible years, super formative years, and it gave me professional opportunities that, yeah, I just wouldn't have been able to really access, from Australia. So that's kind of where it all began. And to your question around, marketing, I studied marketing coming out of high school. I studied marketing, and I always was really interested in the world of brands and the world of kind of, I guess, advertising and that particular aspect of it. But funnily enough, I didn't start my career in marketing. At the time, I'm from Adelaide in South Australia. I was working at a retail store there. The Australians that are watching might remember the old surf brand Mambo.
Ah.
Basically, yeah, I had a store in Rundle Street in Adelaide, and I was managing that store. And at the same time, the owners of the store were sort of bringing me in to help out with a little bit of like the wholesale aspect of the business, because they were distributors. They had a few different brands. So I was running the store, but then I got this kind of opportunity to go on the road with my boss and like learn wholesale. And you know,
Mm.
at the time, I think I was selling like wetsuits and swimsuits and stuff like this. But it gave me a little bit of experience in that kind of wholesale sales world. And then basically I basically told my managers that I was leaving, the owners of the business, that I wanted to go traveling. I wanted to go to the UK, and this is kind of what I was going to do. And I wrapped things up with Mambo and moved over to London, really without a plan, with nowhere near enough money behind me at the time, which I soon realized the whole currency exchange thing at that time as well was
Yeah.
so bad.
Not in your
um
favor. Yeah.
Absolutely not. Definitely had to make a few phone calls home for a little bit of support there, to be honest, back in the day. But fortunately, at the time, the guys from the Mambo store put me in touch with the team in the UK that were running the UK operation. And it just happened to be really serendipitous, happened to be a wholesale sales role open that they kind of needed someone to jump into. I knew the brand, I knew all of the product. I definitely didn't know London, and I definitely didn't know the patch of, the UK, the Southeast that I was going to be looking after. But it just all kind of fell into place. So I started my
Mm.
career in this kind of sales, hands-on kind of sales role, driving around the Southeast, getting terribly lost, visiting all these little surf stores in the middle of nowhere. But that gave me my first taste of really running an area, running a patch from a sales point
Mm.
of view. And I think I was there for about a year or two. I think I was there for 2 years. The business ended up winding down. Surf in the UK wasn't necessarily the biggest sort
Yeah.
of industry. And we were kind of that outside challenger brand. So they wrapped up the business, and then that's actually what kind of got me on what would become a bit of a footwear brand journey. for a while there. So I was looking for a new role, and I actually ended up working for Skechers, Skechers in the
Oh yeah.
UK. Yeah,
Yeah.
which really gave me an education, to be honest. It was never
Mm.
never a brand that I, obviously really liked and or sort of valued in that sense, but it was an
Mm.
incredible business. And going into that, it was the first kind of experience I had working for an American brand in an international market and really understanding how this world of brands and, US headquarters, we would travel to LA and Santa Monica and go to the Skechers head office and go to these sales meetings. And it was actually incredible. And it was
Mm.
tough. It was tough because I guess coming into Mambo, it was, I guess, it was a very small business. It was much more relaxed. All of a sudden, I was
Yeah.
going into something I wouldn't quite call it corporate, but it was definitely a step up, and it was a
Yeah.
learning curve.
Yeah.
I had to really kind of grind
Sink or
and find
swim.
my way. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
But I had some really good people in that business that kind of put a bit of an arm around me. And I remember my boss was sort of referring to me as like a bit of a rough diamond. He's like, we just need to get you kind of up to scratch. And they did that. They invested in me, and I grew that business really well. And then I moved into the key account side of that business and all of that kind of good stuff. And I somehow had a bit of a sales career that I didn't really anticipate. I didn't really
Yeah.
plan for, but I kind of fell into and was pretty good at it at the time. So
Mm.
from there, think I was with Skechers for about 4 years. Yeah, I think about 4 years. Um, and then an opportunity came to work for Converse. And Converse at the time for me was my favorite brand.
Yeah.
It was like riding this huge wave because it was really, my time in London was really, particularly those earlier years, music and culture was just like
Mm.
this. It was just this huge part of my life, this huge
Yeah. And
unlock.
everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's the thing. Like on a random Tuesday, you'd go and see these incredible
Yeah.
bands, and that's what really made me fall in love with London to begin with. This huge
Mm.
exposure to culture that I just didn't have in Australia, and
Mm.
it was very addictive. And Converse was a brand that was very much in that world, so it was a really great fit. I moved into a key account sales role there. And again, that was another step up. That was Converse at the time. It was a very interesting period for the brand because it was previously a licensed brand in the UK, but
Okay.
it was owned by Nike Inc. Nike were basically
Oh,
taking
was
that
it?
back. Yeah, it still is today. Converse is
Right.
actually
Didn't know
owned
that.
by
Mm.
Nike. And Nike were taking the UK marketplace back and effectively building a brand new team to take it forward. So it was
Mm.
very reminiscent of working in like a startup, but
Yeah.
for 100-year-old brand that was,
Yeah.
riding a wave. And it was scrappy and
Yeah.
everyone was kind of figuring it out. But it was amazing to sort of be involved as more and more people. I was not one of the first hires, but I was definitely in the first wave of I think I was the second wave of sales, and I was key accounts looking
Mm.
after department stores at the time. So yeah, but
Super exciting time to be there. The level of exposure you would get because of the part of the cycle would be completely different.
it really was. Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
And, it was a real, because we're taking back a marketplace, there was a lot of like talk around how we were segmenting product and differentiating the ranges and looking at our account base. So it was really it gave me a great experience of here's how you manage a marketplace, right? Previously,
Mm.
I was kind of like sell to anyone and it's all about the revenue. But here it was really about, yeah, revenue will come, but
Yeah.
we've got to act responsibly and protect the brand and really steward the brand so that it continues its future success. And so for me, it was like really stepping into the next level of what a really serious brand looks like. Skechers
Mm.
was a great business, but it was never really
Mm.
like a true brand because of the nature of the brand. It's a copycat kind of thing and captures an
Yeah.
opportunity and spins something out that's really good at a price point. They know their audience. So nothing
Yeah.
but respect for that brand. But it wasn't truly a brand that was embedded in kind of culture. And that was what
Mm.
Converse was, you know, absolutely. So it was great. Yeah.
Very cool. And one of the other things I always think, I think I must have heard this or someone said it to me, and it comes to mind now in terms of London and why for so many people, working in London is a formative part of their career. It was for me too. Obviously, I'm from the UK, but I'm not from London. I moved to London. And it's one of the few places in the world where a significant majority of people who live there are from somewhere else. They have gone there specifically to, I want to move to London, I want to chase the dream, I want to whatever. And so it gives it this really unique kind of vibe, I think, that it's more easy to make friends than it perhaps would be in another big city, because lots of people are kind of in the same boat as you. But there's this shared kind of, I don't know, psyche of what you're there to do. And I think it really changes the experience. Is that how you found it? Is that a similar thing?
Absolutely. It's a bit of a cliche, but it is such a melting pot of culture, and everybody is from somewhere. It was kind of a novelty to meet proper Londoners, and I still got a couple of friends that are
you almost never
born and
do.
bred. Yeah, exactly. Born and bred Londoners, but I kind of met them a little bit later in my time there. But it was also that brings such a great energy, right? Because you're meeting people, everyone has a different perspective, and it actually is such an important part of building a team as well. And that's something that I've taken with me, is like really important to bring people in that have different backgrounds, have different perspectives, and also come from different industries as well, because we're all schooled in a certain way when it comes to brand marketing, but when you bring someone from a bit of a different industry, it changes. They bring a different perspective, it makes you think about things differently, and obviously that always brings different outcomes. So it was a great experience for that part of it.
It's you've touched on one of my soapbox topics there, because it's one of my absolute bugbears about the Australian market is what I see as a quite bizarre obsession with industry experience, and only wanting to bring people from the same industry, which I see as being completely fixed on that as being a detriment for the reasons that you've just explained. If you're always on this kind of same track of thinking, well, where's the innovation? Where's the new ideas? Where's the fresh outlook? It's much harder to get to those things, I think, if you've all basically been doing the same things for your whole careers.
Yeah, absolutely. And because I've worked for numerous footwear brands, and it's been within this kind of sportswear lifestyle kind of world, you do see a lot of similar go-to-market plans, right? Similar ways of thinking. And then someone like myself, for example, goes from one brand to another, and they bring that experience, and it becomes a little bit generic in a way. You have to really kind of challenge yourself to go, okay, what are we going to do that's different to that? Like, it's all about taking what's worked and evolving that to the next level, and that's what external people can help you identify and bring in. So
yeah, absolutely. And would you say then that Converse role was your first kind of, I guess, marketing proper, if we want to call it that, or brand marketing role? That was the start of the next kind of evolution?
Well, I mentioned before, I sort of fell into sales, and my first role at Converse was still a sales role. But what I found in going through that journey was like, okay, the things I enjoyed about sales were basically, meeting people, helping them build a business, building great assortments and collections, getting that out into the market, seeing it perform. But as you get a little more senior in sales, it becomes less about that and much more about really just driving the hard numbers, margins, profitability, and all of that kind of good stuff. And I was kind of like, okay, I've been doing the sales thing for a while now, and I was looking at my kind of peers, and they were all out pure sales guys, right? And girls, really strong salespeople. And I looked at my boss, and I was like, so I don't really want to go into like what they're doing. I don't really want my boss's role. Like, that's not me. I did study marketing, but I've just kind of followed this path, right? I followed this career path, thinking, okay, now I'm a salesperson, I need to follow that. And it just took a little bit of a conversation with my boss at the time, going, look, I think I want to move. I was also looking at the marketing team at Converse doing amazing, fun things.
Yeah, guys, this looks quite cool. Yeah.
Yeah, they were doing, I'd go past their computers, and they were always in PowerPoints with great visuals, and like everything's going on there. And I'd go back to my desk, and I'd be buried in a spreadsheet, looking at order books and
Excel,
things. And I was like, this isn't, I don't think I'm in the right part of the office. But, fortunately, I've been lucky. I've worked with some really supportive people, and, Nike and Converse was a world where, if you had a vision about where you wanted to take your career, they would definitely help you help you pursue that. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I did basically a bit of a stretch assignment over with the mothership at Nike for about 9 to 10 months. It was around the World Cup of 2014. So
Hmm.
helping launch the New England kit. And that was really helped me just kind of understand, okay, here's how Nike are going to market with a new launch of something that's a very big deal, football, obviously,
Mm.
in the
Yeah.
UK, and the England kit ahead of a World Cup. It was a big project.
It's big. Yeah.
Yeah, first Nike kit as well, because they took it over from Umbro, who previously had the brand. So it was a
Mm.
very
Yeah.
pivotal kind of moment. Worked on this
Yeah.
stretch assignment, and in the meantime, just I was still doing my sales role as well, but doing this kind of stretch assignment and kind of waiting to see when an opportunity would kind of open up. And I concluded that, and just at that time, again, quite serendipitously, a retail marketing role opened up within Converse, and I stepped into that, and that was really my first step into the marketing team there. So yeah, that was, again, working for a brand that was embedded in culture, really understanding, how brand communication works, but then how that execution comes out of the brand and has to sit within third party partners. Like that was my main
Yeah.
responsibility. So looking after key accounts and bringing our brand voice and our brand journeys to life in their environment. So pretty tough
Mm.
because,
Yeah.
accounts are accounts. But again, because I had that sales background, like it's actually served me incredibly well because I knew what
Yeah.
they needed to hear. I knew what they needed to like hear from the brand in terms of why this is
Mm.
going to work. And I could speak their language, but bring a marketing message across
Yeah.
and execute it. And I think that's actually, I'm so grateful for my sales background because that has helped me throughout my career, building good relationships with commercial
Mm.
teams and being able to just get things going in a pretty effective way. So it's been a good grounding.
Yeah. I was thinking that as you were talking about it, actually, that I could see how it would in the future. And obviously, hindsight's always 2020. You don't always know at the time, but how it actually would have really benefited you. And
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things that, your example there where you're sort of sitting in the office and looking at what other people are working on and thinking, I'm not sure I'm in the right place, but not needing to throw everything out the window, taking the parts of what you already do and the experience that you already have, and understanding the value in those and how you can then sort of take them in a slightly different direction. I
Yeah.
think sometimes people can get a little bit stuck, lost in that scenario, because I think sometimes they sort of automatically jump to, well, it's got to be like a night and day change. I'm going to throw everything out of the window, blank piece of paper, I'm going to start all over again. And that's very rarely the case. On some level, you are taking transferable skills with you. Sometimes it's more obvious than other times, but
Yeah.
and the other thing that kind of struck me there was, it's one of, I think, the huge advantages of working for a bigger organization is that you do, if you're proactive and you're doing a good job and you're asking the right questions, that you do have the ability to make those shifts within the organization, which is always going to be easier than
Yeah.
than trying to do it from outside an organization.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
as I say, I think it's just one of the huge benefits of working for a bigger company like that.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on with that. As long as you're doing the right thing and you're showing,
Yeah.
you're showing results and you're really committed. I remember one phrase my old sales director used to say is like, when he was talking about career, he's like, position yourself or you'll be positioned, right? And that's
Absolutely.
just such an important thing, is like you have to own your journey, you have to own your direction. If you're passive and you're just kind of rolling with the punches and seeing what happens, very quickly you'll find yourself maybe in a place that you don't necessarily want to be, in a role that you
Yep.
don't want to be. So the clearer you can kind of be, and it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because I always say, be open to what opportunities come your way, because those skills that you
Mm.
pick up can all kind of work for you. But equally, if you're a little bit too passive in that sense, it's not going to serve you so well. So the clearer
No.
you can be, and that's really what inspired the whole transition from sales to marketing, is I'm like, well, I'm pretty clear. I know that's the space I want to be in. I
Mm.
just need to make that happen and ask for that support. So it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic piece of advice, and something I also bang on about constantly. I actually think it's one of the most important shifts that you can make in your career is the shift from passive to kind of proactive. To talk about driving your own bus, because it's just an easy analogy, or being the captain of your own ship. Because exactly as your previous boss said there, someone is going to do it. Just because you're not doesn't mean it's not happening. Someone else is just doing it for you, which means that you might not actually be going in the direction that you want to go. And it can happen, people have got the best intentions, and they, think, oh, you're doing a great job, let's promote you in this direction. It's not like people aren't, wanting the best for you in most circumstances. But I've had so many conversations with people where they sort of say, oh, 5 years have gone by and I've got no idea how I ended up here. And that's often the reason that, they work in a large organization. They've taken the promotions or opportunities or projects that have been offered to them, well-meaning, and then they've ended up somewhere that they absolutely don't want to be, and they're not quite sure how to, not necessarily get back, but even just how to, kind of get back on the path that they wanted to be on. So it's a really good piece of advice.
Yeah, and you have to think about it from a business point of view as well, from a leadership and a business point of view. I hate the reference of human resource department, right? I hate that phrase, human resource, but it's that name for a reason. Like, leaders in businesses have to move people into positions to get the best outcomes for the business. They're constantly driven by, driving those outcomes. So again, if you're not necessarily driving your own bus, then you can end up in places that maybe aren't the best fit for you. So
yeah. And I think you mentioned 14 years in London in the end. Was that what you
I think it was 13 years in the end. And then an opportunity came to actually move to Europe with Timberland, with the Timberland brand. So that was a bit of a change. I'd been in my role with Converse for about 3 years, I think, at that time. It felt like the right moment. It was also a step up. I was looking after the key accounts within the UK, and this role was key accounts, but all across Europe. And it was for Timberland, which was a brand that was, for me, a bit of a sleeping giant. Like, I saw so much potential for it. It had such a rich history and heritage, particularly within the cultural space, but it wasn't really talking at that time. It wasn't really maximizing or talking about that part of the brand. And it was also a really interesting change going from Nike Inc. to VF Corporation, which owned Timberland as well as owned brands like Vans and the North Face. Yeah, they're a big group. So European move into a company that has multiple brands all housed together in the same building, and an opportunity again to be looking after accounts that were based from Amsterdam to Berlin to London, a bit more travel involved, and again another sort of step up to really have that kind of experience was really great. Living in Italy, the interesting thing about that role is VF is their corporate offices were based in Switzerland, which crossed over the border in Switzerland. So I was living in Italy, but traveling over the border back and forth every day to Switzerland, which sounds
real European life.
So,
isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, it sounds very exotic, but it was interesting and beautiful part of the world. Very fortunate. I spent about 7 years there, and it was incredible. So I always thought that I landed there a little bit too soon in my career, because it was really the kind of place that, raising a family, for example, and really betting into that part of the world, beautiful place to bring up kids and have a family. The lifestyle is amazing. And at the time I was ready for a bit of a shift from London. That was, 24/7.
It's full on.
It's a full on place. I was ready for a little bit of a step into something a little bit quieter, and it was great. And that served me really well for a while. But then I eventually started getting
maybe
it
too quiet
again. It was a little bit too quiet, and wanted to sort of get back to kind of that, that city energy and that cultural energy as well. So, but that was, Timberland was a great time. Again, as I mentioned, I started as key account marketing, looking after the key European accounts, and then moved into digital marketing director. So was promoted into a director level position there and looked after the digital marketing and digital brand aspect of things. So that was really getting me right into the world of proper social media, analytics, CRM, all of that kind of fun digital stuff, which was again a learning curve. So I didn't necessarily have that schooling, but picked it up and went with that. And then, yeah, concluding my sort of time at Timberland, I'd already planned to make my move stateside, and I'd sort of communicated that with the team and the leadership team there at Timberland. And it was at a time where they were planning a bit of a reorganization. So I moved into a short-term position to help cover our 50th anniversary launch plans with the brand. And that role was director of brand creative. So that was my main project. It was only a short kind of time. I was there for about 3 months just to see that through. And that was kind of quite a nice kind of swan song for my time at Timberland as well, the 50th anniversary moment. And
Yeah, absolutely.
and the journey there as well, I mentioned at the beginning, like it was kind of not really tapping, Timberland as a brand wasn't really tapping into culture that strongly. But by the time that I concluded my time there, we had a really wonderful VP of marketing at global level come into the business, super tuned into culture, also ex-Nike actually. So she had that real experience of understanding the importance of reaching the youth audience and tapping into culture. And
Yeah.
the brand really took some great strides forward. So it was awesome to sort of be seeing kind of, okay, like the yellow boot, for example, the iconic Timberland boot, kind of available everywhere. Again, segmentation, distribution tightened up, elevated that product, and then got it back into the cultural zeitgeist. It was awesome to see that kind of journey across my time there. So really nice. And
Yeah,
some super
absolutely.
talented people helped make that happen, of course. So
Yeah. So the move to the US was with Timberland, or it was at the end of that time? How did
no,
that come about?
no, my move to the US was personal. I just wanted to make a move. My partner is from San Francisco. She spent quite a bit of time here. So we kind of met and she was living in London. I was living in Italy at that time. And we're kind of like, what's this
Yeah.
next step going to kind of look like for
Yeah,
us?
where do we go? Yeah.
So, but, saying that, I'd always wanted to have some time in the States and working, predominantly for US brands pretty much my whole career. I kind of always saw myself over here. It probably just wasn't the way I expected. I thought it might have been with the brand moving from one region to the next, but timing is such an important aspect of this. The timing wasn't quite there with Timberland. It was just time just to kind of go, cool, I'm going to make that move. But again, I did it with plenty of notice. I stayed on for like 6 months after originally talking to them and built a bit of a transition plan and all that fun stuff. So it was all great. But yeah, it was a bit, what happened is it brought a little bit of, I guess, a bit of a shift, because I made the original move, but I then actually ended up having to come back to Australia for some family stuff, and unexpectedly ended up needing to be there longer term. My father was not well, so ended up being there for nearly 6 months. So it was kind of like, oh, I've made this exciting move. I remember it was about September time that I think I made the move over here, and just started looking around for work and what the next opportunity would look like, and then had to then come back to Australia. And so it's been a little bit of a stop start, journey over here, but it's a great city here in San Francisco. Very different experience again. Still finding my feet, still kind of finding my way a little bit, but yeah, it's been nice. Yeah.
I think that's the flip side, isn't it? Of, we've talked about the positives and, the glamorous aspect of moving and living in different parts of the world. And, that's totally true. I've done it myself, but that's the flip side, isn't it? That you are a long way away from home, and, parents are getting older, friends and family in different parts of the world, navigating visas and all of that, all of that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah.
And similarly to you, if you've got a partner that's from a different part of the world, where are we going to live? And figuring out kind of all of those questions are things that invariably kind of come along for the ride, and do add a significant amount of complexity, but also maybe a little bit of uncertainty as well. Have you found that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, speaking really openly, I found the transition moving to the States has not been as straightforward as I would have hoped. There's visas to navigate, there's all of that kind of good stuff. And also doing a move like that, from Australia to London in your early 20s to doing another big move in your early 40s is it's just
It's
different.
different.
It's just different.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a little bit tougher. I don't have the network that I had in Europe, and really also just understanding how it's just so different when you're looking for a job in 2025, 2026 now,
Yeah.
versus like I hadn't had to look for a job for quite a long time because I'd kind of, you
Yeah.
know, worked my way up and then, was kind of found for the Timberland role and then moved my way through there. And I was like, okay, cool.
Mm.
So I underestimated just that challenge. And I think it's
Yeah.
coincided with a pretty challenging time in the market here in the US as well. So
Mm.
it's a different kind of environment for sure, but I would say that there is a lot of opportunity here in the States. There's obviously a lot of
Yeah.
brands, a lot of really interesting businesses, and for me, the States always just felt like the home of marketing, right? Like the home of kind of
Yeah.
brands and advertising. So that's
Yeah.
why I said
Well,
earlier,
particularly with the brands that you've worked for as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's kind of the mecca of where advertising was kind of born and all of that good stuff. So yeah, it's an interesting place, but it definitely requires a little bit of forethought and planning and navigation. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think a couple of things that you touched on there. One being the importance of network, and obviously when you move to a completely new place, by definition, you don't have a network, and that takes time. Like there is no shortcut, there is no hack to build, certainly not that I'm aware of, to building a genuine network. It takes time. You've got to
Yeah.
invest in the relationships and all of that kind of thing. And I think to your other point about how the market has changed, I think that is definitely true. The kind of what used to work, and it's something I hear all the time. People will say things like, oh, 10 years ago, probably even 5 years ago, I'd decide I was ready for something new. I'd talk to a couple of people. I'd maybe look online. A few months go by, I've got a new job. It was almost that simple for significant proportion of people, and
Yeah.
it's just not the case anymore. And I think there's lots of different reasons for that. I think a lot of the online application experiences, I'm not
Man,
sure I'd go as far as broken, but it's not great. Like
no.
it's pretty bad. And I think technology hasn't necessarily helped. I think it's been a combination of perhaps too much reliance on technology and an underinvestment in the teams that actually,
Yeah.
the people that are needed to still manage that and talk to candidates, interview candidates. I think those two things probably happened at the same time. But I think the way to get a job and the best way to go about looking for a job has just really changed. And
Yeah.
and as you said, like networking is such a big part of that.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that in a new place when you don't yet have that network, it's challenging, and it takes a lot of effort and energy and strategy to try and do that. It's not easy. And I think, as I said, as much as we're talking about the glamorous side and the positive side of living and working in all these different places, which I wholeheartedly endorse, I've done it myself, that is also the reality, that
Yeah.
it's not always easy, and that you are in lots of instances almost starting from scratch. Like you do kind of have to start again in lots of different ways. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah,
um
absolutely. You're right. It's very easy to talk about the glamorous side of it, but it takes hard work. It's not for everyone, really. Like it's definitely not
yeah.
something that is, yeah, is. I mean, I recommend trying to live in as many different places as you
Yeah.
can, just for a
Yeah.
rich and fulfilling life of experience and,
Mm.
professional development. Like I'm an advocate for that, but many people aren't. Many people don't necessarily want that. And I think just knowing kind of what you want and what you're up for, what kind of challenges you're
Mm.
up for, knowing that, you're going to take a few bruises along the way is really important.
Yeah.
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 And as you said, a move in your early or mid 20s is a bit different to a move
Yeah.
then in your early 40s. Like you're, perhaps not as flexible in terms of, oh, I don't care where I live. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
as long as I've got a roof over my head. You're like, no, I'd actually like to live somewhere quite nice.
Yeah, definitely. My first apartment in London was on top of a fruit and veg store. It was just this little that won't cut it anymore. So
Well, exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
life's moved on a bit, hasn't it?
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Have you noticed through the different kind of brands and places that you've worked for those brands in, have you noticed kind of, I want to say, like, different approaches to marketing? And I don't know if that's exactly how I want to phrase it, but do you notice kind of idiosyncrasies between how the UK market versus perhaps the European market would approach something versus the US?
Yeah, I would say it's probably been a little bit less about like marketing tactics differing between countries and markets that I've worked in, and more about kind of the culture of the organizations, the cultures of the
Mm,
organizations and how they sort of prioritize. And the one thing that I recognized very quickly when I moved from Converse to Timberland was Converse and Nike was very much brand first. It was very much brand oriented, and getting the brand out there in the right way was a very high priority, right? Knowing that you were
mm,
nurturing a brand and looking after a brand, they understood that that was gearing the brand for long-term success. There's always going to be highs and lows and dips, but they knew that
yeah,
brand was really, really key. And I think when I moved, and I mean this in the best possible way, to VF, it was much more about the business. It was more about, and there was a very clear hierarchy actually. It was very much sales and finance followed by marketing. Whereas
yeah,
with Converse and Nike, I think it was just more of a level pegging. Obviously, sales and finance are right
yeah,
always going to be at the top because they're so
yeah.
important, such critical
Mm,
functions. But marketing was really right up there as well. And I think that was a
mm,
very noticeable shift in moving from company to company. Again, a little
yeah,
bit less geographic, but a little bit more,
yeah,
corporate culture changes. I think
yeah,
differences.
yeah.
Yeah.
More broadly, do you think we, the collective we, have lost a bit of focus on brand? I think as, maybe social and content's become so important, and, you know, digital enabling us to analyze metrics and all of that kind of stuff. Have we lost a little bit of the focus on what brand actually is and why it's so important, do you think?
Yeah, I do think we have, but I also think it's a bit of a yo-yo, right? Like is the most important thing, and then performance is, and it's this balancing act that I think we've been doing this dance with for the last 5 to 10 years about what gets kind of prioritization. But I feel like moving into 2026 and moving into the future, brand is resurging in terms of its importance.
Mm,
And for me, brands have always just been about how do brands connect with people and how do brands make people feel? And that's what made me fall in love with the world of brands. And that's why I was so excited when I started to work at Converse and be in the Nike world, because growing up, I was obsessed with Nike, obviously, like obsessed with Jordan, and, got to watch that kind of evolution. And Nike were experts at telling, at creating that feeling. And I
mm,
stand by the best brands in the world are the brands that make you feel. And
yeah.
so I definitely feel like there was a bit of a shift where, the whole digital evolution came through, performance marketing and tactical advertising, lots of budget being thrown into that. And it was a little bit at the cost of building the brand.
Mm,
But I feel like that brands have already started course correcting in that respect. And that was a
yeah.
first-hand experience I had at my time in Timberland. It was
Mm,
the brand side of it was a little bit neglected, but then we shifted that and we started investing at the top of the funnel at brand level and really getting that,
mm,
what does this brand mean to people and how do we connect it? And that was really what changed I think the journey of that, of Timberland at that time, because it became more relevant. People remembered that Notorious B.I.G. wore that,
yeah.
they have this
Yeah.
huge New York history, and we
Yeah.
started doing the collaborations with brands that we had synergies with, and it started getting it out there again. Um, I think that's definitely super, super important. And I think it's going to continue. Yeah, definitely. I think there's a nice resurgence. I think it's going to be a real shift around the way brands connect with consumers now is changing pretty
Mm,
drastically. I think, it's not just about creating a great vignette or a great brand anthem or anything like that. Those things are important, but it's really actually about what is the brand doing for their audience now? What is the brand offering? Because I think there's a real risk that brands can sometimes be asking for everything. Can you,
yeah.
engage with our content? What do you think of
Yeah.
this? What is the
Yeah.
brand actually doing for their audience? And that's what I think is really important. And that's, I think, the evolution of how brands are going to really connect in a more meaningful way. And it's going to be very different to what it's been before. It's not just about sponsoring the World Cup or being,
Yeah.
sponsoring these big flag tentpole events. It's more like, okay, what can we set up to, let's say a brand, like Converse is a good example. We were sort of deep in creativity and creative expression, and music was a real pillar of our brand. So we set up a studio and invited people to come in to create, that's being of service to your
Yeah.
audience in a really authentic way. And the brand is not, yes, of course we had branding around the place, but it's not that it's like, look what Converse are doing. It's like, look what these musicians are doing. And Converse
Yeah.
are kind of doing that, and yeah, there's so much evolution right now. I think it's a really fascinating time to be in the brand world, to be in marketing, because, you know, it never stops. It's constantly evolving. It's a bit of a cliche, but the way things are evolving now into 2026 already, I just feel like there's so much change that's coming. We've obviously got the elephant in the room with AI, and that's kind of what impact that's
Yeah.
kind of going to have. You can do some amazing things there. I'm not completely anti AI at all, but I'm also definitely not all in on brand voice and creativity coming through AI. I think there's like a
Yeah.
real, and I think the best marketeers are going to be the ones that can, really kind of marry the two together and get the balance right. And I think that's where taste is going to come to
Yeah.
the forefront. It's got to be who's got the right taste level to go, hey, that adds to our message, but it isn't just all about the AI element of that. It's just something that can be brought in. So yeah, it's an interesting period for sure.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about taste, because I haven't heard that as a sort of an argument against AI. Normally it's the kind of the authenticity piece, which I totally agree with, the human connection piece, again, which I totally agree with. But you're spot on, and actually taste, quote unquote, is the right word for it,
Yeah.
because how else, AI can't do that, because its frame of reference is everything else. Like
Yeah.
it can't, certainly at the moment. Yeah, it's a really interesting way of framing it, of thinking about it. I like that.
Yeah.
And as you say, elephant in the room. I saw a really interesting meme. It might have been probably a cartoon more than a meme, but it was spot on, of how, I think there was a proportion of people, marketers, who were probably a little bit in panic mode last year around AI and what was going to happen, and this is the end of marketing as we know it, etc. And then I saw this cartoon, which was, it was started with the fax machine, and then we went to, computers, and that was going to be the end of marketing. And then it was email, and that was going to be the end. And then it was social. And then it was, I think actually marketing is perfectly positioned for this, because they've been through so many cycles and so many iterations of, the thing that's going to destroy us all,
Yeah.
and actually working out how to use it and how to harness its positive attributes, and bring it into the toolkit. It's just another tool in the toolkit. And I thought that was a really just a useful kind of dose of reality and realism, and just hang on.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much evolution in our technology and the way we use it. It is just a really incredible. I mentioned before, like I use it daily, right? Everybody pretty much
Yeah.
at this stage, I guess, is using it at some capacity on a daily basis. And it is just an incredible tool to have in your arsenal. It just shouldn't be the tool that you are
The
relying
tool.
on
Yeah.
to do all of your work. I think it's incredible for operational and streamlining processes and help, like creating it at agent level to do some of the task oriented stuff for you. I think there's some great stuff. And Sora and some of the video technology is unbelievable. Like, it's amazing. But I think at the same time, with this avalanche of content that's going to be generated out of that, again, I come back to taste, but I come back to the
Yeah.
authenticity and the connection that people are going to be craving, because they're going to be bombarded with all of this
Yeah.
stuff. So real voices are going to be more and more important.
Yeah.
Real stories, real tales of connection, and real tales of impact and execution, I think, are going to be really, really, really important as we move into this next phase. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Final question, Adam, and it's always the final question here, and that is, what do you know now that you wish you knew then?
Well, I think thinking of the themes of our conversation, not necessarily going down one direction and expecting that to serve your career. I think that's something that I didn't necessarily know that back then. And it was scary when I had to make a transition
Mm,
from a sales where I'd built myself to a certain level and, protected the, and then change direction again. I think be really open to different kinds of work and different kinds of experiences, because you never know what is going to light that spark that actually that you want to lean into and step
mm,
into more. So I think I wish I knew that a little bit more, because I probably was a little bit fixed in direction. It took a little bit of, I guess, courage and a little bit of,
yeah,
gusto to kind of make a change. Whereas if I'd maybe been a bit more open to that earlier, I could have just been involved in marketing projects a bit earlier and found that even a bit sooner.
yeah.
So I think trying new things is really important. And I think the other point is probably around really, well, probably 2 points. One, have fun with your work. Like, we spend so much time there with people that, everyone, and remember, everyone has their own stuff going on in their life. So lead with empathy, try and bring some joy to the workplace. It's still, everybody wants to drive results and do great work, and setting high standards is always important, but try and do it with a smile on your face, I think, is really, really important. And then finally, I would say, support the people in your network, you know, make friends with people online, use LinkedIn to connect with people.
Yeah,
I know it's a bit of a love-hate thing for most people, myself included, but it's an incredible world out there. And there's
yeah.
so many intelligent people out there that are sharing great ideas and great value. And I think, yeah, connecting with them and supporting your own network is really important as well.
Mm,
So, yeah.
yeah. Great advice. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, on the LinkedIn thing? And I think we all have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it. And there's a percentage of people and the way that they use it that probably probably leads to some of that. But
Yeah.
if you can kind of push that to the side and actually just look at the positives and what it actually gives you, a way, an avenue to be able to connect, as you said, with people all over the world and start conversation as we did,
Yeah, exactly.
start
Yeah.
conversations with people that you haven't met in real life, that you don't know. And it's such an amazing tool for that. And I think if people use it in the way that it's, I guess, intentioned, and try and focus less on some of the other stuff, it is actually quite an incredible tool.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you so much. Really, yeah, really interesting, and such an awesome journey. And slightly selfishly, I always love hearing about people's London experiences as well. So, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for spending the time and, yeah, sharing what you've learnt so far.
Of course. Emma, thank you for reaching out. It was really nice to get to know you a little bit more. Really enjoyed this conversation. And I love the work that you're doing as well, particularly in this coaching
Thank
space
you.
and helping people, find their North Star in the best possible way too. So yeah, keep up with that.